It's Monday, May 12th, 2025, an unexpected outcome to trade talks with China over the weekend, previewing the big, beautiful bill, and I think the U.S. is winning the tariff war, and I'll tell you why next on the AM Update.
Can tell you that the talks were productive.
These are very tough negotiators, and this was, as the Secretary pointed out, a very constructive 2 days.
And we're highly confident after communicating with Chairman Smith that all of the President's top objectives are going to be in the bill. And then it'll go on to the Senate and hopefully be there by the 4th of July. And literally everybody thinks that could happen.
The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at.
You're the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. What does that job entail?
Well, I have to say, I did not see that coming. After all, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent last week previewing the trade talks between the U.S. and China over the weekend. He really tempered expectations, basically saying that these talks were supposed to be talks to decide what we were talking about so that we could further talk about other things we could talk about when it comes to trade. It sounds like he, along with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, are actually really encouraged and say a lot of progress was made.
We will be giving details tomorrow. But I can tell you that the talks were productive.
U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer gave even more details about what was discussed and the speed at which they came to conclusions.
I want to echo the Secretary's remarks with respect to the Swiss government. They've been so welcoming, and they've hosted this, and everything has gone off flawlessly, and we appreciate that. And again, to the Chinese negotiators, Vice Premier Liu He, Vice Minister Li Qiangong, and Vice Minister Liao Min worked very diligently, and these are very tough negotiators. A couple of them I know from before and have had past interactions with them. And this was, as the Secretary pointed out, a very constructive 2 days. It's important to understand how quickly we were able to come to agreement, which reflects that perhaps the differences were not so large as maybe thought. That being said, there was a lot of groundwork that went into these 2 days. Just to remember why we're here in the first place is the United States has a massive $1.2 trillion trade deficit. So the President declared a national emergency and imposed tariffs, and we're confident that the deal we struck with our Chinese partners will help us to work toward resolving that national emergency.
So that is U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, and I think reading between the lines there, especially when he talked about, well, maybe the differences weren't as large as thought, that tells me that maybe unexpectedly, we're a lot closer to a deal with China than we thought. There is a new, well, I know this will surprise you, new media narrative that needs to be debunked. We'll do that in Air Analysis. It has to do with whether or not ships are setting sail from China. Again, more on that in Air Analysis. Back at home, however, we go from Switzerland to D.C. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett says progress is being made on that big, beautiful bill working its way through the U.S. House of Representatives.
We're really, really pleased with the progress. The Ways and Means Committee is going to have a mark probably Tuesday where they put everything on the table. They've got a sketch of a deal right now, and we're highly confident after communicating with Chairman Smith that all of the President's top objectives are going to be in the bill. And then after that, we expect by Memorial Day it'll pass in the House, and then it'll go on to the Senate and hopefully be there by the 4th of July. And literally everybody thinks that could happen. There's not a lot of disagreement left in either the House or the Senate, and so we're super optimistic that this is going to be probably not only the biggest tax bill ever, but the best designed and the fastest achieved. Think about it. Have you ever seen anything move this fast?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things move faster than that. We're being told now it is a big bill. Okay, so I want to give that, its due. It is supposed to be a very large bill, kind of a sweeping bill in terms of number of issues tackled. But basically what you're hearing from Kevin Hassett there is that Congress is so slow. The first real meaningful legacy piece that they are going to actually pass for President Trump isn't going to come until July 4th, Independence Day. So yes, I've seen some things move faster than that, but it does sound good that progress is actually being made on not only keeping the Trump tax cuts from 2017, but it sounds like even going further. Here is Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming. He's the Senate Majority Whip, so that's pretty important. He's pretty optimistic that this bill is going to pass with all of President Trump's priorities.
We're working the bill through the process. It's going through the House. We're ironing out the details right now. we're going to get a bill passed and signed by the president that's going to put more money in people's pockets and give them the certainty that taxes aren't going to go up.
In other news, we came closer than you might expect to a nuclear exchange over the weekend as the Indian-Pakistan war heated up or died down, depending on the source of information. Of course, it's just the latest iteration of wars between those two countries who hate each other, by the way. Well, President Trump announced in a Truth Social post that India and Pakistan on Saturday had agreed to a ceasefire. He said in the post, quote, "After a long night of talks mediated by the United States, I'm pleased to announce that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire. Congratulations to both countries on using common sense and great intelligence. Both foreign nations are among a handful of world powers that possess nuclear weapons, making tensions between the two countries particularly dangerous on a global scale." U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio noted in a statement that he and U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance had engaged with officials from the two foreign countries and had agreed upon a ceasefire. There were some reports later on Saturday that Pakistan or India had violated the ceasefire, and then Pakistan came out and claimed victory. So who knows where that's going. Just the latest skirmish, if you will, in a long-standing feud between those two nations. Well, it is Groundhog Day again. The Trump administration, according to a federal judge in California, must halt much of its downsizing of the federal workforce. Judge Susan Ilston in San Francisco issued the emergency order in a lawsuit filed last week by labor unions and cities, one of multiple legal challenges to President Trump's efforts to shrink the size of the government. Ilston wrote in her order, quote, "The court holds President must likely request congressional cooperation to order the changes he seeks." The temporary restraining order directs numerous federal agencies to halt acting on the president's workforce executive order signed in February and a subsequent memo issued by the Department of Government Efficiency and the Office of Personnel Management. So another day that ends with why another pissing judge in the further reaches of our country, this time in San Francisco, saying, "No, I'm actually a God King / president now." White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Stephen Miller said Friday the president is looking, or at least reviewing, the possibility of suspending habeas corpus in order to deal with the illegal alien invasion.
Well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. At the end of the day, Congress passed a body of law known as the Immigration and Nationality Act, which stripped Article III courts, that's the judicial branch, of jurisdiction over immigration cases. So Congress actually passed, it's called jurisdiction stripping legislation. It passed a number of laws that say that the Article III courts aren't even allowed to be involved in immigration cases. Many of you probably don't know this. I'll give you a good example. Are you familiar with the term temporary protected status, or TPS, right? So by statute, the courts are stripped of jurisdiction from overruling a presidential determination or a secretarial determination on TPS when the Secretary of Homeland Security makes that determination. So when Secretary Noem terminated TPS for the illegals that Biden flew into the country, when courts stepped in, they were violating explicit language that Congress had enacted, saying they have no jurisdiction. So it's not just the courts aren't just at war with the executive branch. The courts are at war, these radical rogue judges, with the legislative branch as well, too. So all of that will inform the choices the president ultimately makes. Yeah.
I had not heard that before, that judges, when they tried to step in and halt the ending of TPS, temporary protected status for illegal aliens that Biden had granted, they're actually going against statute, which should not be a surprise. But Stephen Miller from the White House pointing out there that not only are they going to war against the executive branch, now they're waging war against Congress, the other branch, the legislative branch. The only way out here is through. All of these judges think that they are God kings. And so tell the courts to take a flying leap and suspend habeas corpus. I hope they follow through with that. I don't know if you saw the very left-wing anti-Trump Lincoln Project over the weekend. Just completely clutching their pearls about potentially suspending habeas corpus. The Lincoln Project. Yeah, that was great. This is great, too. Here is David Hogg. He is DNC vice chair, young man, for survivor of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas mass shooting in Florida several years ago. Here he is with Bill Maher on Real Time Friday night.
We're very proud of you. We feel you grew up on this show. How many times have you been on this show?
This is my third time.
Oh, I thought it was like 8. Okay, well...
No, I'm not that old yet.
You've done very well. No, you're only 25, and you're the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. Very impressive. What does that job entail?
So that job really helps to play a role in managing a lot of what the DNC focuses on, which is things like the presidential primary. It's helping to be the campaign and waiting for the president. It's helping to manage the debate schedule and helping to support our state parties and local parties around the country. It's a volunteer role, I should add, as well. So it's entirely volunteer capacity.
So nothing.
Boom. Roasted. When we come back, air traffic control in Newark, New Jersey lost radar contact for another 90 seconds Friday morning. How does this keep happening? The Earth is swallowing around 25 cities in the U.S., according to a report at CBS News, and blowing up the latest mainstream media hoax on trade. That's coming up next.
It's a long walk. I'll be back in Poland.
This is the scene aboard a train featuring German Chancellor Merz, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and French President Emmanuel Macron. What's the big deal about this? Well, the three leaders had been in Ukraine to talk about various issues, of course. When they came back aboard their train and let the media into their media room, or their meeting room, Emmanuel Macron grabbed a small baggie which appeared to be full of some sort of white powder, very awkwardly hid it away from view. German Chancellor Merz grabbed a coffee stirrer, what looked like a coffee stirrer, also in the same awkward fashion, hid it away from view of the press. Now, I don't know what that means, but a coffee stirrer, or straw, if you will, along with a small baggie filled with what appears to be white powder, and both of these heads of state very awkwardly and hurriedly hide both those items out of view. That is very, very odd. Back at home, this happened again for the second time in the last few weeks. Air traffic controllers directing planes into the Newark, New Jersey airport briefly lost their radar on Friday morning for the second time in 2 weeks, renewing concerns about the nation's aging air traffic control system. Federal Aviation Administration said the radar at the facility in Philadelphia that directs planes in and out of the Newark airport went black for 90 seconds at 3:55 a.m. That's similar to what happened back on April 28th. That first radar outage led to hundreds of flights being canceled or delayed at the Newark airport for the past 2 weeks after the FAA slowed down traffic at the airport to ensure safety. 5 controllers also went on trauma leave after that outage, worsening the existing shortage. It's not clear if any additional controllers will go on leave now. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy on Meet the Press yesterday laid out exactly what he's asking for and what the problem is with the United States' current antiquated air traffic control system.
A system that's 25 at best, sometimes 50 years old. The Congress and the country haven't paid attention to it, right? They expect it to work. And so now I think the lights are blinking, the sirens are turning, and they're saying, listen, we have to fix this, because what you see in Newark is going to happen in other places across the country. It has to be fixed. And so what we're having is some telecom issues, but we're also having some glitches in our software. As the information comes in, it's overloading some of our lines and the system goes down. So I'll just tell you specifically in Newark, we believe we're going to have it up and running in short order. We're going to be able to fix that glitch, and we feel a little more comfortable about our primary line that gets the data in on radar, and our redundant line is up and working as well.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy also laying out last week some of the just antiquated technologies. I said there, antiquated like floppy disks. Our air traffic controllers use equipment like floppy disks still for some of their operations. You know, I've debated in the past, what is the government's role at any level in terms of transportation? Is there a role for government there? All I know is when I fly, I don't want my life, my safety to be put in the hands of floppy disks. Here's a story from CBS News. New York, Dallas, Seattle, and 25 other major U.S. cities are sinking, threatening the structural integrity of buildings, roads, dams, and other forms of infrastructure. New studies authors say it represents a looming threat to the infrastructure of these cities, which combined are home to more than 34 million people. Study by Virginia Tech researchers published in the journal Nature Cities on Thursday used satellite-based radar measurements to visualize movement of the land underneath the nation's most populated cities, which they say is largely due to groundwater extraction. In all 28 of the cities they analyzed, at least 20% of urban areas are sinking. In 25 of the cities, they found at least 65% of the area is sinking, and more than 29,000 buildings are located in high and very high damage risk areas, indicating a greater likelihood of infrastructure damage. One of the cities that they actually surveyed is Washington, D.C., and to that I say you can just keep sinking for all I care. And now here's this. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy spoke to Fox News in an exclusive report late last week talking about the MMR vaccine. And I just want you to take a step back, listen to this as if you were, put yourself in your shoes 10 years ago, and tell yourself that this would air on Fox News one day. Listen up.
We also understand that some people don't do that. The MMR vaccine that we currently use has millions of particles from were created from aborted fetal tissue, millions of DNA fragments, and there are people who have religious objections toward those, and those people should be treated with compassion. If they come to a hospital and they're sick, we need to know how to treat them. And one of the failures of the CDC in the past is they weren't telling doctors, no kid should die of measles in this country. Even in 1963, before the introduction of the vaccine, there were 400 deaths a year, and there were up to 2 million measles cases. So it's only very, very sick kids should die from measles, and nobody should.
There's some that were saying that the rubella portion of the vaccine, and you were talking about the produced from the fetal cell line, originated from an abortion that took place in the 60s. But the MMR vaccine doesn't contain the cells in its final form.
It doesn't contain cells, but it contains DNA fragments.
Got it. And so that's your point.
Yeah. So, and people have religious objections to that. And although I might not share those objections, I respect them. And I think those people, a lot of the Mennonites told me, and I went down there and spent time with the community during the outbreak, and they said they didn't want to go to the hospital because they were treated as pariah. They said we were treated like lepers there. And that should not be part of American health care. If somebody comes in, if they have a religious objection, we should still be treating them.
That is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., HHS Secretary. Again, tell yourself 10 years ago that sort of content would air on a place like Fox News. That we're going to be talking about aborted fetal tissue, that's dead baby body parts, being used to develop vaccines like the MMR vaccine. And that would air in good company, polite company, on Fox News. And saying, very charitably, that people who have religious exceptions to technologies like that deserve compassion and welcome. That is a tectonic shift in the Overton window. The Overton window, what's allowed to be discussed in polite company that we've decided, in this country or in a culture. That is a tectonic shift in the Overton window. And finally, air analysis. You've probably seen a few headlines the past few days. U.S. representatives sound alarm over slowing port activity. Trump says ports running empty is a good thing. Cargo at the port of L.A. is down 35%. And so on and so forth. China freight ship traffic to busiest U.S. ports sees steep drop. The last boats without crippling tariffs from China are entering U.S. ports. And on it goes. Well, is that actually true? You'll be surprised to know, no, it's not. In fact, there was one reporter from CNN, Jonathan Lemire, who reports 0 ships from China are bound for California's top ports. Officials haven't seen that since the pandemic. Well, what does the actual data show? According to Bloomberg's terminal, That's a very robust computer application that shows real-time shipping, financial data, just a massive tool for traders and stockbrokers. According to Bloomberg's Terminal app, on May 10th, which is the same day that report from CNN saying that there were no ships from China in the last 12 hours, because everybody knows that's the most important metric in the last 12 hours. The very day that he sent that, there were actually 53 ships headed for California's top ports, all of them from China. And all of these ships are big ships. They're not completely full, but they're mostly full. And by the way, 53 ships on May 10th is more ships that were inbound to the United States from China than on May 10th of 2024, a year ago. So, yeah, maybe a small decrease in shipping from China to the United States, even amidst these tariffs. It's not the cataclysmic showdown that these media reports are trying to show that it is. I publicly predicted about 3 weeks ago that by today, May 12th, we would understand, we would kind of have an idea of who has the upper hand in the tariff war. It would be clear how this tariff war was shaking out, and I made that prediction based on shipments from China. Well, in the last week, we got a marginally better deal with the United Kingdom. Put a bookmark into that. A marginally better deal, the type I've also predicted here on AM Update would happen for most countries, China notwithstanding. We're now being told, rather unexpectedly I might add, we're much closer to a deal with China after this weekend's Switzerland meeting, and shipping from China hasn't really slowed. By the way, a marginally better deal, I laid this out last week, just want to make sure it's clear. Marginally better deal with one country like the United Kingdom is one thing. Marginally better deals with 25 or 30 countries, that's unquestionably a good thing for U.S. producers. So I think if you were just analyzing this in a vacuum, China hasn't really slowed down, which means what? They're paying those tariffs. Will some of that be passed on to the consumer? I'm sure some of it will be, but it hasn't completely. They've just made their bet. They're going to have to pay these tariffs. They have to. So they haven't completely shut down everything yet. We got the first of, we think, many deals with the United Kingdom, and we're really close to a deal with China. And we're basically a month into this. So I don't know whether this is, I don't truly know what the posture is of the Trump team, whether they still feel like they're in an advantageous position, or whether this didn't really go like they had planned. And so they're just kind of taking what they can get in the short term, and then they'll go and pursue a longer term strategy of isolating China. I don't know. But it certainly seems like if you were analyzing this in a vacuum, maybe not the total domination that you were hoping for, but still, there are pieces moving and things that are unfolding that are good for you. Like I said, marginally better is still better. Even if it was a marginally better deal with China, I think I'd quibble with that a little bit. We definitely need a path of decoupling from China. But taken as a whole, we're seeing movement, and the movement is in our benefit from what I can see. Do you agree? Let me know at Real AM Update on X. That'll do it for Monday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.